Hey everybody, we're back with another Let's Draw with Jet, and we're going to see if we can try and finish this flash sketch up in this second part. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to try and see if I can kind of formulate a little bit more of a manlier head shape. This one is kind of too anime, so let's make it more longer. It's a little better. He has more of a pointy nose as well. Yeah, there we go. His mouth is more curved upwards. I'm just working with light shading before we make anything too permanent. Starting to look a little bit more like Grant. I think I've sketched out as much as I can before moving to the actual pencils where I can shade better. Alright, so we've kind of got to define the collar a little bit more here. It does have kind of like a leather jacket look to it, so just following my reference as much as I can to get the collar to look like the leathery effect with the folds, the little ripples in the clothing. The zipper guard. It's very dark on one side from the light. Most of this image is pretty dark. I usually have my tablet up and I'm looking straight on a full brightness image on my tablet. It's a lot easier to pick up on the details, but for this, I just wanted to, make it as simple as possible so you can see the reference right there. But yeah, I think we are ready to move to the actual pencil. For this, I'm gonna have to have my eraser handy at all times. Okay, so we have the basic idea of the shapes, and now we want to start adding the shades to it. So it's gonna be really challenging because most of it is the scarlet red color, the scarlet speedster color. So it's gonna be very dark wherever else you don't have typical shadows. Some shades here of normal. Oh, this is where it gets tough. There's like a sun reflection right in the middle right there. You see that? There is a big spot of sun right in the middle of his helmet to the right a little bit. So we're going to shade everything scarlet with like a medium tone, just kind of like that. I need a pinpoint eraser. So I'll just use the end of my mechanical pencil, get that sharp, distinct line right there on the side of his helmet. And it gets a little bit brighter here. So it's all about applying the right amount of pressure to the edge of the pencil. There we go. So we're trying to capture this line of shade right here that goes straight down to his eye, and then it's bright all on that one side, so we can make it darker here. And it's pretty dark for the rest. It's kind of a medium hue of red to a spot in the middle, some light right there, and then there is more light from the lightning lighting him up in the back. So for this trick, I'm just going to take an eraser and kind of create that little sunspot or whatever you want to call it right there in the middle, and then we'll blend it just with a finger. Depending on how moist your fingers are, it'll blend at a different rate. So to keep it consistent, feel free to use a blending stump. Slowly forming that spot nice and easy. Starting to see that form little by little, and then lighter pressure as you go to the center, and then no pressure at all in the middle, and then more pressure out on the edges, so it creates that circular even pattern. And for the lightning marks on his helmet, we can always do those last. Cool. We can always go back and refine that later. Then it gets really dark right here on the side of his nose from the lighting, and then it lights up a little bit right there, and then where his face hole, the eye holes on his face dip in right there, it gets pretty contrasty right about there. So just following the line, that shape right there. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the more time you spend on it, the more realistic it should look. But we don't want to be too perfectionist with our art, because then if we go too far, start messing things up. And then this eye is really dark, which we can do all the skin tones after we've done the red suit parts first. So there's a really stark line right there. The shade is obviously due to a contour in the helmet hole, the mouth hole. I don't know what you'd call that. And then it's kind of round right there, follows his face. A tip that my 9th grade art teacher always gave me is, and a lot of anime and cartoonists don't follow this rule at all, but a tip that he gave me was there are no lines. It's all shades. Even the darkest, most obvious line like this, like if you'd see that in nature, that does not exist. This does not exist in nature at all. Neither does this, these, those, all these lines. Nothing exists in lines. It's all shades, shadows, highlights, contours. If you see this line in nature, it's because whatever texture or whatever is being lit by the lighting in the area is so different in contrast to what is actually there, like the edge of a wall or rounding a corner. There is no line there. It's actually just the end of a shade. It's the end of a shadow. Like this line right here in the paper that you see does not exist in nature. It's simply the difference of color and contrast between these two items and the shadow it produces underneath. So basically, when you're shading, when you're creating art, there are no lines. There's just a deep difference of contrast between two things. So that really comes in handy when you're trying to shade something and make it look realistic. So like this line right here on the eye hole has a really dark line on the edge, but that's because the shadow is created very distinctly there. There is no line there. You just have to create the shadow depending on how you shade with your pencil. That is a very helpful tool that I've used pretty much ever since 9th grade. Even though I still prefer to draw the lines, and every cartoonist and anime artist, every comic book artist, well 90% of the artists, they prefer the line art, because lines to a viewer of the art, they see the lines, so it might as well make it easier for them and create the lines. So that's why a lot of cartoonists, their styles get so popular, is because the lines are visible, they're apparent. And most of my art I sold in the first 2 or 3 years of doing conventions was line art. Most of the commissions I did was line art. If you go on my Instagram and just look at the commissions I've ever posted, you'll see it's a majority of it is line art, because line art is so popular. It's highly requested for commission art because that's just the easiest to accept, especially for cartoons and anime. But then you'll have, every once in a while, you'll have an artist who is super good at this kind of stuff, at realism and putting their art into shades rather than straight up lines. And their art, if they spend enough time on it and they're good at it, it's pretty popular to a certain degree, and a certain type of fan will appreciate shaded, realistic art like this, because they know that it takes a lot of work and it's cool to capture the real person in a different artist's style. It's, like I said earlier, line art is still the most popular. Even to the people I do commissions like this for, they'll still purchase a bunch of my line art too, because line art is so popular. I may have stated this before in a video, I may have not, but I will state it again now. I'm going to make a cool little how-to guide. If you're an artist and you're interested, I will have this series on how to create or translate your art skill into a self-made business. Those videos will be coming hopefully within the month, maybe even sometime this fall. Be on the lookout for that. Like and subscribe, and you'll be one of the first people to see it. So this thing is coming together. We're gonna do some blending at the end to make sure that the reds stand out in a different way than all the yellows and all the whites and his skin tone as well. So that's going to take a little bit more time, but it should be fun. And like I said, we can come back and add all the details at the very end for all the lightning effects and all the lightning marks on his suit, especially the 2 lightning bolts on his helmet there. Now we're just going to work on the collar area, and it's very dark in some parts because it's right underneath the helmet. But don't be afraid to make those shades as dark as possible. Add to the contrast of the image, make it more realistic. As you may have noticed, I've been using the side of my pencil more than the actual tip, because with the tip you'll get very dark contrast lines, and we don't want those quite yet, except for areas like this. It won't be a bad idea to go ahead and just add that right there with the tip of the pencil, and then underneath it shade really dark as you can, as dark as you can. When it comes to actual experience regarding this type of style, I actually don't have that much. I haven't even done any like follow along Bob Ross realistic art stuff. I mean, the most follow along realistic stuff like this format that I've done, it was not even realistic, it was more cartoonish. If you've ever watched Pappy's Land in the 90s and 80s, it was this kind of older cartoonist guy who would draw cartoons that would come to life with his magic pen, and that was one of the coolest shows I've ever seen when I was a kid, that's for sure. It inspired me to do more cartoons. What were some of your favorite cartoons? Go ahead and let me know in the comments below. I know one of my favorite cartoons that inspired me to draw like right away was the old Sonic Saturday Morning cartoons, where you'd watch Sonic the Hedgehog and the Freedom Fighters of Not Whole Village. Oh my god, that was some dark stuff for kids to watch back then. Sonic went through some pretty dark times in the early 90s. I think it was 1993 when this show came out. And it was so dark compared to all the other shows that I used to watch that it inspired me to kind of draw dark stories and dark characters. I actually made my own Sonic comics when I was a kid. So like I said, what were some of your inspirations, whether it be cartoons or realistic art or even just real people? What were some of the real people or things that inspired you to become an artist? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to connect. A lot of other things too, like anime. It's definitely a huge one now. It still is. Ever since I think the late 90s is when it started to get popular for kids, but it's been around for way longer than that. I remember watching Speed Racer at 3 in the morning when I was a kid. That was the first anime I ever experienced, and it was definitely something I loved drawing as a kid. I loved drawing the Mach 5 jumping off a cliff. Yeah, that was some good times. I might have to do a live stream sometime with this format of video so I can just chat with you guys and hear what your inspirations were for your art. That would be a lot of fun. So back to this drawing here, I'm trying to add the shades. Like I said, there are no real lines in nature. I'm adding shades at different degrees, different levels of intensity to create those lines. Now you can see those lines are forming as a highlight where I don't shade. So I'll shade dark where you see that finger, and now there's a line there. Do you see that? It's crazy how that happens. And then we'll do another shade between the ring finger and the middle finger, and boom, that creates another highlight above the ring finger. So now it looks even more realistic. So shading like that will definitely look more realistic, but when I add the lightning effects from the Speed Force, it's gonna look even more intense because we can highlight those lines and make them shine a little bit better with the lightning all around. It's amazing what you can do with a pencil. Alright, now it's going to be a little more difficult with the thumb because there are less lines to work with around him. So we'll just kind of copy what we see in the image to an extent. And I'm just going to shade the whole thing, and I'll show you a trick. If you add dark shadows to the entire thumb, you can take a pointed eraser like your mechanical pencil eraser, and you can just add the highlights with the eraser. So it looks like there's a line right down the middle from the leather. So we have more slick leather for the elbow pad area, just similar to the knee pad area. So what we'll do there is we'll make it shinier with a different pencil once we've got the dark parts lined out. Most of this image is pretty dark, so I'm just gonna have fun with that and make it real dark later. Then you have this line. So I hope my tips and tricks on how to shade and make something look realistic is going to help you in the future. And if it does, I'd love to see your work. Leave a link to any uploaded art you have on DeviantArt or Instagram. If it helped you out, I'd love to see it. And I'm always looking for fan art submissions for DreamersEcho Volume 3, which comes out probably next year. We're still working on that. But every time I release a book, I always look for new fan art, the back of the book, the guest art section. So if you want to be a part of that, head on over to DreamersEcho.com and check out the guest art submission page, which should be on the homepage near the bottom, or DreamersEcho.com/contact. I think the contact page will have everything you need to submit your fan art of my characters and DreamersEcho characters in your style. That would be an honor to see that. I always love posting for Fan Art Friday. Is something I used to do on my pages a lot, but now we're gonna try and bring it back if we can get some more fan art out there. So if you'd like to be a part of it, it's kind of like a draw this in your style challenge. It's like the original draw this in your style challenge was people just drawing fan art for their friends. So that's basically what we're doing here. So head on over to DreamersEcho.com if you want to submit some DreamersEcho fan art. We've got a bunch of different character profiles on the website, throughout the website, so check that out and you can see what each character looks like. If you need more color references, feel free to reach out. I've got plenty. I will post it on my Instagram, on my website, and I'll make sure that you get credit for it. And if you want, we can even link your Instagram or your DeviantArt or whatever website you have at the bottom of the art piece on the book itself, so, or in the book. So we're going to make the top of the slick part right there. Just kind of shade everything we can. It's coming together slowly but surely. So some of this shadow work is actually guesswork, just to keep it original as well, because we don't want to copy it exactly. Make it as realistic as I can. So if you want to take a closer look, it's turning out to be pretty decent. I will say, out of all of the Justice League commissions I've done with the realistic sketch covers, the Aquaman one might be my favorite one I've done so far. But we'll see. Once I add the lightning for this, I might change my mind. So there's a lot of creases I've noticed with the smoother part. There's a lot less creases, but then with like the textured cloth part, there's a lot more creases. So that will give us a distinct difference between the two kinds of materials once we start finalizing the shades on all of these. And we'll also add texture too with some like stipulation or something to really bring out the differences in the different structured textures throughout the suit. So then he has this weird belt buckle thing that has a split in the middle, and then it goes down like here, like an upside down chevron. So we'll make that work by putting contrast right in the middle, and then a different shade or different direction on the other side. Check that out. Okay, I'm gonna keep it a little simple too. And then he has the lightning stripe that kind of comes down here. And then with these, it's okay to use the tip of the pencil to really get the contrast going. Lightning stripe, just like that. And then he has another lighter tube that goes there. Kind of comes up all the way. Sharp edge right there. And that's where the smooth part starts. And the textured part is right up there. Okay, so then we'll shade that first. It's okay to be messy with these shades, because we're going to go back with our eraser and we're gonna correct those with the blending stump and make them smoother. And then his lightning belt, it comes out like right about there, and then it goes back around his back. So we'll just do the same thing on that side. And then it starts, there's like a lightning bolt that starts right here, goes down, up, down, then it ends right there. And then it does the same thing on this side, but it's not as visible due to him being so lungy. Lungy, that's not a word. The lunge that he does with this running stride right here is going to make it a lot less visible. And it's also under some of the jacket, so we're just going to put the jacket go over that, and then the pant part go over that, and then it pretty much ends right there. It's going to be a lot darker there, so it's not that bad if it doesn't look perfect. Like I said in the first part, I want to make this arm come out a little bit more, so I'm just going to go ahead and make a hand, and then we'll see how that turns out later. We'll shade more of that later. Let's work on the pants a little bit more. Okay, we'll shade right here and keep it light right there, and then shade underneath a lot more. Pants are really dark because they're in the shadows right there, so we'll make a fold there. And then each one of these folds has a shade underneath it, and it all kind of collects at a point, which is the point is right under his belt right there, and then the shades spread out like a fan. You see that? They go out like this. The one that ends underneath his belt is like right there, and then there's this one kind of curls in right here and comes to the point, and then it's where the point of the movement starts and ends up, because the movement starts here at the pelvis, and then he's lunging this leg back. The clothes are being stretched back too and collected at a point. There you go. It's a good tip. Usually most clothes do that. You see that in his armpit. Every armpit has the same thing. You can look at my armpit right here. The clothes meet at that point. Almost every cloth has that same property, even leather especially, because it's harder to ripple leather. It's harder to bend leather. But when you're in such a big motion pose like this, it's gonna look more bent for sure. This is where it gets difficult. We'll have to do some guesswork because the logo is in front of his leg. In that case, we'll just make the whole thing dark because it's in the back. And then it's further back, so it's going to be darker and it's going to be curved to follow the contour, the perspective that it creates. That leg is done for now. Now we're going to do this side. Dark, even darker there. A little bit lighter there. Kind of leather paneling on his pants, And then there's more shades that converge, shadows that converge at a point here right above the thigh. Then they spread out way more since this leg is in the foreground. It's going to be a stronger curve upwards. This one was a curve downward with the shades. This one is a curve upwards because it's coming towards us. Might have to sharpen my pencil here soon. Let's see what we can do. See how far we can get. Cool. There's some light on the other side of the leather paneling. And then you have this really weird knee pad effect on the suit where there's ridges. There's several ridges to create a gill effect. Yeah, there you go. So we're not creating those lines, like I said, we're not drawing the lines, we're creating the lines with shadows. Exactly what we were going over earlier. And you've got dark on the edges, dark in the middle, just a little bit up to the middle, light right here, dark on the sides. This is not very hard at all, guys. It just takes a little bit of technique and time, patience, understanding. Now, let's see what we can do to translate that into that. It's gonna take a little bit of work with the blending stumps, and I have a charcoal pencil to add depth, darkness, because normal graphite pencils, if you don't have the right intensity. But then you have this, I just have a straight up charcoal pencil, which is jet black. Nice. Jet black, ultra smooth. That's like my birth name. See how much darker that applies, like to that part right there? I barely touched it and it adds so much more darkness, but the downside with the charcoal pencil is that it doesn't blend as well because it's more permanent. All right, now let's get down to one of my favorite parts, blending, because it makes everything come out a lot smoother than when you started it. Like you see right there, we won't even need to add more pencil to the face because the blending itself, if we're careful and precise enough with the small enough blender, we can get in there and we can add the skin tones ourselves with the blender. It's all coming together. The lips are a lot darker. I might use the charcoal pen for the lips after blending it, because we'll lose some of the details when we blend. That's something to keep in mind. If you're going to be using a blending stick a lot, it will eliminate a lot of the details, especially with lighter colors, lighter shades. They kind of just disappear in the blend, but it looks really cool. Add some dark there, kind of create that forehead ridge, and then round out that with the thicker blending stick, which I think I dropped on the floor. Yeah, there we go. Oh man, that charcoal part bothers me. Oh well. So I'll do this, use the side, create that round highlight effect, and take an eraser to where it's brightest, create a little circle right there, and blend that in, just like that. We'll just blend the whole area. Nice. And you can always use your finger to blend too. The oils, the natural oils in your finger will spread the graphite out just enough, but you will lose a ton of detail. So you might have to go back and redraw some of it, which I will have to. Alright. So yeah, the head's getting close there to being done. Let's work on the suit. I'm gonna blend the yellow part first, or the gold part of his suit, and then we'll add the highlights to it using a pointed eraser. Looks like the highlights are on one side only, and then they are on this part, the top part, and the side. And then we can draw a few lines in there to make it look more complete. Now let's blend some more into this smooth leather. I use a lot of blending with smooth leather because you gotta make it as smooth as possible, and then the details will form in themselves because the smooth part is the detail. And we'll add texture to the rest of the suit that isn't smooth leather to add difference in texture, contrast in texture. I'm trying to say as many cool sounding art words as I can. Make the smooth leather as smooth as possible, blend the heck out of it. And then he doesn't have any of that smooth leather on his arms, only on the elbow, which has that gill effect again, which I can use an eraser to make that more apparent. And that's it. So then if you just spend a lot of time blending out the smooth leather panels, that's what you'll get. You'll get smooth leather texture. And then he has a lot more of that smooth leather right down here I'm going to try something a little challenging, something I really never have done before, or I rarely try to do. I actually try and avoid is for the textured parts. I'm going to use this charcoal. So it'll look darker, but it'll look more textured because charcoal is naturally textured once you put it on paper. It really brings out the texture of the paper. That's why charcoal is so popular for classic mediums, because the texture of paper adds more character to your art. Whatever texture your paper is, your art will shine through those tiny little marks of texture. Do some light charcoal wherever the texture is, and then there's only a little bit on his arm. And then the pants, there's a lot of texture on this outer panel. And it looks like this goes on the other side too. We'll make this part textured too. Why not? Now I'm really liking that. It is really challenging to try and capture charcoal without messing up. There we go. Now let's try and blend that. The texture's nice, but let's make it look a little more consistent. And this is where charcoal really pisses me off, because it is so hard to blend and make look good. So it forms itself to the texture of the paper so well that when you try and blend it, nothing desirable comes out. But we'll make it work for this piece. Yeah, pretty decent. Not bad. Okay. Look at that. Look at that. Now we have the basic everything. The basic figure, the basic shading, the basic shapes, the basic highlights. A lot of artists just see this and they call it good, honestly. A lot of artists will say that's the finished product. And if you're doing commissions at Comic-Con, you won't have a lot of time to finish a lot of detailed art like this. So you will actually look at this and be like, wow, that's pretty good. I think I'm done. But for my commissions that I do at home, I like to spend a lot more time on them. And I'm going to add so many more details to it. I'm going to do the finishing touches in the next part. Stick around. This is what we have so far. Really hard to position this in front of an upside down camera. I'm going the wrong way. Okay. This is what we have for part 2 of the Flash, drawing the Flash as realistic as possible. So now we are going to add the finishing touches in part 3. If you enjoyed this part, please leave a like and subscribe, and share this video with anyone you think could use some tips in drawing realistic art. I know there's a lot of artists out there who are struggling. I'm still one of those artists who struggles, I'm not afraid to say. So it's good to hear what other people have to say about the process. So I hope to see you in the next part. Thanks for joining me.